using this book tonight. Okay, and this is one of my favorite books. So as we go down, and when I talked about how you study, if you're, studying with me or however you want to study, break it down into domains. Okay, so just break it down. Do human growth and development. Spend time learning that one. Okay, then you're going to go to, social and cultural diversity. So all of those things are equally as important. So sorry, whatever people say, they're about the same amount except for the research and the stats. Okay, read the code of ethics, know the code of ethics. Some of them are verbatim. I hear all the time, but there's a $25 limit. It does not say that anywhere in the code of ethics. A boss told you that, or someone when you're doing an internship, but the code of ethics does not put a number value on there. So be sure that you know it. And again, some of those are just totally from the book, from the code of ethics. You can Google it. It's ACA Code of Ethics. And you can, the 2014 is the newest edition. So if you see anything, different than that, older than that, make sure you get the newer one. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? I've got someone who cannot. Can everyone else see my screen? Oh, you know what? I didn't share back. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to switch screens. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. There we go. Now do you see my book?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we could have looked at the lovely ladies the whole time. That would have probably just been fine. Okay, so again, this is Hellwig, and so it's the definition of group, and we're talking about group and the different types of group. When it comes to the people of the group people, the four biggies, of course, are going to be Corey and Yalom and Tuckman, and then we have like Joseph Moreno. Those are the biggies. Are there other group names? Yes, there are. What I suggest is that you learn the biggies first, and then when you have time, as you're getting closer to the test, you can go back and pick up new people. But in general, I stick with the biggies. Okay, and the goal is that you will never know everything, but hopefully I can rule out because I will know enough to know who it can't be. Okay. So just some of the advantages of group counseling. Okay. People learn a social context, you experience social support, the group norms develop. All of those good things are things that just naturally happen in the group process. Okay. I'm a huge fan of group. I think that when the group is running, I certainly have to do so much less than when I'm doing an individual, right? Because when I'm doing an individual, it's just me in the room and the group is running, then I can say, hey, Bob, what do you think? John, what do you think? Right? Depending on what stage we are. So you'll see the types of group. So for the test purposes, in the real world, you might use something different, but for test purposes, what we know is the guidance group is something I'm mostly going to find in school. Okay, so that's giving the kids guidance. The counseling group is something that is not, somebody's calling in. So that is something that is not going to be the same as a psychodynamic, right? Okay, so a psychotherapy group is something that is done in a mental health hospital. It's something that it's done in usually some kind of residential place. It is not the same as a counseling group. So for the test, that's what you're looking for. In real world, again, different story, but for the test, I'm just trying to make sure that it is. So I'm trying to let somebody in the group, guys. I apologize. Okay, sorry, just let somebody in. Okay. So, psychoeducational group, again, what I'm looking for in the questions is making sure that I understand what I'm looking for. The key to passing this test is not only knowing your terms, but also knowing to go back to the question to see what I'm looking for. So, my guidance group, again, most often done at schools. Counseling, it's growth, development, removing barriers, not the same as a psychotherapy group. Psychotherapy group is almost always going to be in a clinical setting. Okay, psychoeducational, that's one where I am teaching, and you'll see in the question that you are teaching parenting skills, you're teaching anger management. That's a psychoeducational, right? So anytime that you see that in the question, that's the role you're taking. Structured groups most often are time limited. Those are the people that have to come, their court order, they have to be there, they have to 6 weeks of parenting. All of those things are very structured. Most often in those groups, there's not a lot of client participation. It really is more of a teaching as opposed to the clients participating in those groups. Okay. Self-help groups, remember, they do not have a formal counselor, right? Self-help groups are my AA, my Parents Without Partners, the group of people who've all got the same stuff going on. That's going to be my self-help group. Okay. T groups, those are training groups. You might see that on there. There used to be a time where you'd go away for the weekend with your group or your business, your colleagues, and you'd go and you'd learn something. Those were training groups. Okay. One of the things when it comes to like the task groups, those are task focused. So those are very much more structured. We're here to get this done. So many of you been put on a task group at work. You have gone to your boss and said, "Oh, I think it's a good idea that we try this." And he says, "Well, go ahead and get that started." And you gather some people with you and you sit down and you kind of come up with a group. So not necessarily a counseling or any kind of mental health group, but it's still a group that's got to get this task done. Okay. So the group dynamics, the healing process is in the dynamics. So what Yalom believed, and we'll talk about his curative factors, but those are all part of the process. The content is what we're talking about, but the dynamic, the cohesiveness is where the healing happens. When I can let my guard down and I can trust and I can share things. That's also when you get to group cohesiveness, the counselor doesn't have to work near as hard. Because if Bob, who always keeps running his mouth, and now we're 13, 14, 15 in the group, Mary's going to say something now. And it's like, come on, Bob, you talk all the time. So I have to work less because the group cohesiveness will allow them to really kind of work well with each other. So, there are the stages of group. We'll go down to those. We'll come back to those. Oh, somebody just came in. Just mute yourself, please. So I'm a Tuckman fan, to be very honest with you. That's what I've taught, and that's what I've always gone with. And he does the forming, storming, norming. Okay, not everyone uses that, but to me, if I learn one of them, they're all going to be the same because the stages are all the same, except like Corey believed in a pre-group. Okay, and the code of ethics says if it's possible, we should have a pre-screening. Okay. We all know it's not always possible, but on the test, if it asks you, the code of ethics does say that that's really something that should happen. Okay. So again, Tuckman, my favorite. I can remember him easy. Forming, storming, norming, performing, and mourning. Okay. So it doesn't matter which one you use. They always are going to occur in the same order. Okay. Different names, but still the exact same process. Oh, yourself. Mm-hmm. Make sure you're muted there. Okay. So let's do Tuckman. Okay. So again, the stages have different names, but the process is all still going to be the same. Okay. Copy the image and put it in the chat box there. So forming the group is just formed. You're just getting to know each other. You are, it's those first stages. You come in. I kind of, I teach college, so to me, it looks very much like my college classroom, the group when class starts. So we're forming, and people get in, and they're really nice to each other, and you kind of like you're not real sure where to sit and what to do. You're just kind of like, okay, but you're not that superficial nice, right? Then the storming. In my classroom, that happens about week 3 or 4. That's when you decide that, oh my gosh, she's smart. I'm gonna go sit by her. Or she smells good. I'm gonna go sit by her. And you're changing the seating pattern. Like the first couple of weeks, we were good, right? Everybody's in the same seat. But all of a sudden now you're feeling your oats and you're gonna sit someplace else. That is when we begin that storming process. Bob, you always make coffee. John, you're always late. I can't believe you always do this. That's the normal part of storming, right? We're trying to get to cohesiveness, but we can't get there until there's some fighting. Okay. Then we norm. Norming is not me setting the rules. Me is the group setting the rules. Okay. So this is, again, these are not court ordered. These are just kind of people, healthy groups that people choose to come to, right? So the norming process is going to happen. We're going to figure out, oh, hey, I really like Bob. Let's start sitting by him. And then you'll find the same people starting to do the same routine. You're going to sit in the same seat. You're going to find out that Johnny usually speaks first, or Bobby always does this. Someone always does this. All of those things. Okay. So that is the norming. Performing. The performing part is when the group is working. That is the actual cohesiveness. That is when Johnny and Becky can get into a minor altercation, and Johnny and Becky can work it out. Or another member will say something, right? Because they've got that cohesiveness. They're working now. That's when Bobby gets called on his stuff. Johnny, you said you were going to stop drinking. Blah, blah, blah. Why are you still drinking? Bobby says, cause I can, right? So you're calling each other on your stuff. That's what happens at that stage. And then, of course, it's over. Okay. So forming, storming, norming, performing, and then mourning. So that's the one that I always remember. However, if you grew up, if you learned on a different one, still know that all of the stages are still going to be the same. They just have different names. So Corey said, Yalom said orientation, conflict, cohesion, and termination, right? So orientation would be the same as forming. Storming would be the same as conflict. And then the norming would be, the performing is my cohesion, and then it's over, right? So Corey and Corey, they said, again, he always lived in a pre-group. Okay. He said pre-group, and that's where the screening would happen. Then the initial session, again, same as the forming, right? And then you've got your transition. That's my storming section. Working. Okay. So that's when we're actually in that cohesiveness. That's where it's happening. And the final stage, which is the same as termination. Okay. So any of those, whatever model you use, just know, again, I don't think I need to learn all 3 of them, because the processes are going to be the same. So pick the one that you're most comfortable with, and know that stage that group moves from the very beginning of not knowing each other to then very much fighting, and then we're going to be able to norm, perform, and then we're done, right? So whatever words you use, just know that that's what we're looking for when it comes to group. Now, Yalom, of course, he's the one that came up with those curative factors, right? He said there are 11 curative factors. Those you do need to know, okay? And again, they and not just know the words, know what they mean. Okay, so altruism is doing the right thing for when no one else is looking, doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. That is altruism. Universality is a term that we like in group, right? It lets us know that we're not alone. Interpersonal learning. So just when it comes to that term, one of the ways that I remember, and I think that'll help you remember, is INTER is like intercourse. It is more than one person. So interpersonal learning is not learning about me, it's learning about the people in the group, right? Intra, INTRA, that's just me. So sometimes I'll see Freud, and Freud uses like intra-psychic, INTRA, but INTER, intercourse, Freud would say sex, that is more with more than one person. So whenever you see an interdisciplinary team, more than one discipline. Okay. So imparting information, of course, and that is not just from the group leader, that's from other people in the group as well. So when we've gotten to the point where we're at cohesiveness, I'm not the only one doing the talking. And again, that's why I love it so much. Because you know what? Barbara says something and I'm like, oh my gosh, Barbara's gotten on my last nerve. So I'm going to say, oh, Johnny, what do you think about Barbara? Right? Or there's a term called linking. And I can say, well, Johnny, did that happen to you? Maybe you could talk to Barbara about that. I can link those group members. Developing socialization techniques. Those are just social skills, right? When someone's talking, you make eye contact. You're not on your phone when someone's talking to you. All of those things are just things that we learn in group. Imitative behavior, whether that's the leader or another group member, that I learn, wow, I like the way that he dresses or the way that he speaks or he raises his hand or look how he treats his wife. All of those things I can learn from being in that process. The cohesiveness, of course, we talked about that. That's that tightness. And catharsis that is that Freud word. Catharsis is that, right? That emotional relief at the end of the day, the cry. Okay, so that's what catharsis means. And that's actually a Freudian term. Okay, so corrective recapitulation of your primary family group. All that means is most often in the group process, there can be someone who reminds you of someone that maybe you didn't have a great relationship with in your family. You'll see a question like, Sally is working in Sally's group. There's a 45-year-old man who's kind and sweet, unlike her own father, who was not. So what is she getting from this group? What is this term called? Corrective recapitulation. She is correcting the broken things from her family in this group. Okay. The installation of hope, of course, it's going to get better. Hang in there. We got this. Existential factors. That means one is not alone. Okay. And again, when it comes like existentialism, I can always go back to, knowing my theories and knowing that, that was Viktor Frankl, right? With existentialism. So what is my purpose? Why am I here? That's something I can easily remember. Okay. So those are Yalom. They're called Yalom's curative factors. So these are the things that happen inside of group where that cohesiveness, that tightness, that's where that happens. And that's what I'm supposed to learn according to Yalom.
Pam, can you say what the I can't pronounce it, catharsis is?
I sure can. It's catharsis, and it is an emotional release. Okay. And thank you for asking the question. But if you would just hold off your questions until the end, so that way I can get the recording in without a lot of disruption. So just hold on to them. Thank you. That's catharsis. I'm sure you've all had great lives and great days. You've never come home from work and like, but I have. So, okay. So then going back, let's make sure we picked up all the things. So the code of ethics talks about what happens in group stays in group, right? Can I control that? I cannot. I can always ask a client. I can remind my clients that, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this way. We talked about this, but I cannot control that. I can't kick people out of group because they didn't do that. They didn't follow the rules. I cannot do that. Okay. So the only things we would share outside of group. So let's say that, Johnny told me inside of the group session that, he feels like going home and killing himself. Now, while I may address that in group, I'm also going to pull Johnny aside. I'm going to do a separate assessment on Johnny to see whether or not I need to do some reporting on this, right? But everything else other than that safety issue stays in group. So if Barbara comes up and says, oh my God, last week when Johnny was saying this, it made me so upset, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to say, bring it back to group. Bring it back next week. Okay. So it's like the group, the family, the individual is all one entity. I can't see couples separately. I can't see group members separately. I can't do, and I know it happens in the real world, but for the test, you can't be my individual client and be in my group session. Can't do that. Okay. So you'll see these a lot, the roles of the group members. These are not roles that anybody has assigned them to. Those are roles that people choose to, based on their personality, kind of based on who they are. So facilitative, that is someone who helps facilitate. And again, these are not leadership positions. These are group members who kind of take on those roles. The maintenance role, they help with the bonding of the group. The blocking role is the one that we don't like. The blocking role is the person that stops the group from going forward. So whether it's his own stuff he keeps bringing up, or every time, Cindy tries to bring up stuff about, her marriage or go past it, the blocker's like, nope, 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 right? So he hinders the group from going forward. He also hinders the cohesiveness, okay? So the goal is, though, in group is that one of the members would recognize that and then say something. In the beginning, though, the therapist might have to say something. You know what, Johnny, I noticed that every time we try to talk about Cindy's issue, you keep trying to stop it. Or every time we bring this up, you change the subject. So I really want to make sure that I, in the beginning, as a therapist, I've got to stop that blocking role. Okay? You've probably seen these in your studies. The leadership styles. Autocratic is authoritarian. Autocratic is fine if I'm in a group of drunk drivers and they've got 8 weeks to get this down. Sit down and let me do what I need to do, right? Okay. Laissez-faire, fairly lazy, is not a good idea if I'm in a group that is highly unstructured. Okay. But laissez-faire works well if you've got some people who are very, very structured and they don't need a lot of leadership. Okay. Autocratic, that is democratic. We all get say so. Okay. We talked about Corey's roles. Oh, let's go back to these. I'm sorry. So we talked about Corey's roles, but these are terms that you'll see everywhere. So Corey uses them in the group, but you will see these these are all those active listening terms, and you've seen them in the study guide. You're like, what? So active listening really is the overall heading of what we're doing. I'm making sure that my client is aware that I am present, I'm paying attention, I'm in the moment. Reflecting always includes feelings. Okay, so a client is telling me something about his day and, blah, blah, blah. Reflecting is going to say, wow, it sounds like that was a rough day for you, or it sounds like you're sad. I'm reflecting back the feelings the client did not say. Okay, clarifying, if you've had me before, clarifying something I do all the time, because my 17-year-old daughter uses words that I don't know what they mean. And I'll say, honey, what does that mean? Come back and tell me what that meant, because I have no idea. So I usually use the example. She says she's going to go break the bread, get the bread. I'm like, what the heck? She's going to go work. Okay, whatever. So she's, well, the other day she told me, sus. She goes, Mom, that's sus. Like, what the heck does that mean? So, and clarification is okay in the middle of a conversation with a client, whether it's in a group or an individual. You don't want to keep going on the entire time and you really think it's bread, right? You've wasted your hour and their hour. It's okay to stop and clarify. So that is sus, means that I don't think that's true, Mama. That sounds a little suspicious. Okay, so summarizing is the end. So summarizing is at the end of an individual session, end of a group session, end of anything, you summarize what we learned today. Okay. Facilitating is only for group. So that is something that, that's kind of making sure everybody gets a turn, making sure Johnny doesn't speak too much. I'm not controlling the group unless it's one of the ones I have to, but I'm facilitating. Empathy, of course, is letting the client know that I can relate, I can understand their feelings. But it's not sympathy. We don't feel sympathetic. All of their friends are for sympathy. We are for empathy. What makes our field so special is we can understand that when a mom leaves her baby in the car to go get drugs, we understand that mom's a drug user. And at that point, mom thought that was the okay choice. It doesn't make it right, but we're not the ones feeling sorry for mom, right? We're empathizing. We understand how this could happen. We understand where she came from. And then we're really going to make sure that we share that with her. So on that empathy scale, okay, so that is so Carhuff's empathy scale is always going to be a 10, a 5 or a 0. Okay, nothing in 5 or 1, nothing in between. They are not trying to make life that hard for you. Okay, so the empathy scale is by Carhuff. And it's measuring the empathy of the counselor. Okay. Okay, so what we're looking for is there's 5 levels. The first level is little or no empathy. The top level is most empathetic. So you'll see, Barbara said something and Johnny responded. Okay, so the client comes in and hold on, sneeze. Sorry about that. Wow. Okay, so the client comes in and she says, "Oh, it's the worst day ever. You wouldn't believe this. My daughter, she did this and she did that, blah blah blah." And the counselor says, "Well, what do you want to talk about today?" Like, he didn't even respond to what she said, right? That's going to be a 0 or 1. So 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest. It's never going to be a 2, 3, or 4. That's way too subjective. They're not going to do that to you. Okay, that's your empathy scale. So while we're talking about empathy, go ahead and pull that up. Okay, oh, no, let me put that in the chat box. Thank you. Okay, okay. So interpreting, again, so interpreting is making sure that we're on the same page. What the client just told me, I'm going to kind of interpret it to make sure I understand it, and not necessarily a foreign language, just to make sure I heard what they said. Questioning. Linking is in the group session when you're linking two people that have the same kind of issues. Okay, Barbara, you said this, blah, blah, blah. John, can you relate to that? So I'm linking the people. Let's see, confronting is most often we're going to see that in our drug groups, right? But confrontation is okay. It's not something we use a lot, but definitely if you've got a client that's using inconsistent stories, right? Last week you told me this and this week you're telling me that, that's something you would use. Okay, so those are all terms. Those are Corey's core skills, but you'll see these terms throughout, especially when it talks about those active listening skills. So no difference between like reflection and clarifying, all those things are really important. You'll see those a lot on the test. Okay. Some other terms you'll see, scapegoating. That actually belongs to like Virginia Satir. Remember, she talked about in family terms. Scapegoating is when we blame that one person. If Johnny would just show up on time, I could work on my issues, right? We're putting all the stuff on Johnny in the group. Resistance is the same kind of resistance you're going to see in individual processes. With co-leaders, good and bad, it's really nice if we have co-leaders, but on the test, if you have two therapists or co-leaders, the key is making sure they communicate, because they may come from very different theoretical orientations. If I'm a Gestalt person and I'm focused on the here and now, and I'm working with a person who's a Freudian and they're trying to get to the person's unconscious level, we're going to work together, right? We're coming using very different approaches. Okay, so that's a theoretical orientation, or those theory styles that we learn. Okay, so co-leaders are fine. You might see conjoint leader. So what that means is that you have, especially with a couple, you have a male and a female. So what happens is the male and the female may see the male and the female couple may see the male and the female person, or the male or the female are all together, but the couple never gets separated. So you might see that as well. But again, the key is two therapists, two co-leaders. The key is that you make sure that you're working on a similar theoretical orientation and that you communicate together. You see those words a lot, homogeneous and heterogeneous. Okay, again, prefixes make it so much easier to understand the words on the test. Homogeneous, homosexuality, the same. Homogeneous groups are the same. Heterogeneous groups are not. Okay, people who are homosexual like the same sex, people who are heterosexual like the other sex. That's all that means. Homogeneous and heterogeneous. Okay, so homogeneous groups are easier to bond. We all would rather be in a group of people that look like us and talk like us and sound like us, right? However, heterogeneous groups are more like the real world, where everyone is not the same. My open versus my closed group. Open group, people can come and go as they please. Closed group, it is a closed group, and when members leave, we do not add new members. Okay? So what I'm looking for then is for example, AA. Okay, so an AA group, there are some AA groups that are open. So that means if you're trying to get clean, you can be clean. Everybody will come in, and AA's philosophy, of course, is I just have to want to be clean. So the guy sitting beside you could have been, getting high a few minutes ago, but it's an open group. We come and we go as we please. A closed group, on the other hand, my closed group of AA would be people who are working on the 12 steps, right? So as opposed to someone who's just stopped drinking 15 minutes ago, or someone who's really working on it, those are my open and closed groups, a difference. And I do not replace members in closed groups. Okay. Group size, the adult group, the optimum size is 8. Okay. Then I'm getting feedback. Okay. Remember, as you come in, especially if you go out and you get bumped out or come back in, just to mute yourself. Okay. So children is half that. If you've ever done a group with kids, I think 2 is too many. You're trying to get them to behave. Just sit in the chair, stop throwing things, right? So the goal is as small as possible. So the groups will run advanced. That's usually depending on 12-week, 9-week. It depends on what the group is. The optimal time is 90 minutes. Okay. And if it talks about money, it's okay to make money. Group is a great way to make money, right? It's cheaper for the client. It's cheaper for the insurance. All of those things, right? So it's okay. It is a cost benefit. So for what you get, you definitely get a lot more. So if your insurance is paying $75 for a group, so that's reasonable and customary, and you got 10 people in there, that's not bad for 90 minutes, right? So, and then for the clients, then they're paying 75 as opposed to like $225 an hour. So it really is cost beneficial. Like I talked about before, screening really is an optimal choice. However, it's not always something we can do, but we do want to screen if at all possible. Okay. Just some ethical guidelines I think we've talked about a little bit before. Informed consent. Informed consent means that the client is aware of the group process, right? He's aware that things in group may not stay in group. He's aware that there are some things that I cannot hold. So in addition to signing that form, the client has to understand it. So that's where the IRB came in, and we're looking at the Tuskegee men who did the syphilis research. They knew they signed the paper for research. They didn't know what was happening though. So that's unethical. So part of that informed consent is reminding the clients, making sure they know what's going on. They know all the details. They do have to sign it, but they have to understand it. And then also letting them know that there are some things that I cannot keep confidential. If you tell me you're going to hurt yourself or hurt someone else, I cannot share that. I'm sorry, I have to share that. I cannot keep that confidential, right? So, you tell me that you're going to go out and kill your wife after we leave this group. I got to inform the wife of the police, and especially if I believe that's really going to happen. There's a question many times I've seen on the test about someone stands up or someone shares in group that they killed someone a few years ago. So that is not imminent danger. I cannot share that. Okay, he could have come in and told me he killed someone yesterday, but if no one is in imminent danger, that is not information that I can share. So that would be a brief of confidentiality on my part or the people in the group. So I really want to make sure that I remember I cannot share that. Okay. Now, if I think it's going to kill somebody else again, then yes. If he tells me he's going to go break in somebody's car, I can't share that either. Okay. It's imminent danger of hurting himself or others, not someone's property. Okay. We've talked about the stages of group. Talked about Yalom and all of his good things. Waldo, not a huge one. Again, I'll share this with you at the end, but he's not a huge one. Moreno, you do need to know, though. He's the one that came up with psychodrama. And the way that it worked with Moreno and his theater of spontaneity is the person who had the issue, they were the protagonist. So they were, the protagonist acted out the person's issue. So if we're talking about, Barbara and Barbara's having difficulty in her marriage, then somebody in the group would act out what was going on in the marriage. So it was kind of like acting out the client's stuff. But the protagonist, that's the member whose stuff we're acting out. Okay. Psychodrama is 3 stages: warm up, acting, and integration, right? So, I think that's kind of, those are the words that you could use. We warm up, we're going to practice, we're going to act it out, and then we're going to kind of compress it at the end and go over what we learned. That's the integration stage. Primary, secondary, and tertiary groups, those are terms you should know. Okay, so those come from mental public health. So primary, oh, somebody's not muted. So primary, secondary, and tertiary come from the mental health approach. I'm sorry, public health approach. So for example, with COVID, our primary goal is to stop it from spreading. So with anything primary level, that is stopping it before it gets there. Okay, so the commercials you see on TV, to be sure that you wear your mask, you stay 6 feet away, you wash your hands, all of those things, that is primary prevention that everybody gets, right? Secondary prevention is now maybe you've been exposed to it, right? You isolate yourself for 14 days. You go, you watch your fever, you do all those things because you've been isolated, you've been exposed. The tertiary level is now you've got full blown, and how do we minimize the risk from it getting worse or you spreading it to other people? So whether you see that an individual process or a group process, those are the stages of of prevention. And again, it's based on a public health model. So whether it's a drug group, so if I'm doing a drug group at the primary level, I'm getting elementary school kids and I'm having the DARE people come in and talk to them about not doing drugs, right? Because that's the beginning. The secondary may be people who've already been exposed to drugs. Maybe they've got an older brother, sister, mom in jail, some things like that. My tertiary group are the people who are my drug users. Okay. So then, primary groups on preventing problems and developing healthy behaviors. You might do that in a guidance group or a psychoeducational group. Your secondary, those are preventive and remedial elements of group. So you're focusing on reducing the length, you're looking on reducing the severity. So they've already been exposed to the problem, right? And the tertiary group is where those are people who have, they've gotten it. So either I'm trying to minimize the hurt of the person or help them go back to the regular world, because they've got that label. As everything, when it comes to multicultural, be sure that you know your own biases. That's always the answer for the test to do first, and always in general. We all have biases, right? We just do. So the first thing I have to do is like keep my stuff in check, be aware of my stuff. And then if I'm looking at how I acculturate, add this group culture to the group, I'm really kind of making sure I understand culture. And if my Hispanic person doesn't make eye contact, or my Native American doesn't want to share, I just want to make sure that I'm aware of culture in the group. Okay. This section I'm going to go through briefly. Again, you'll have this information. But so to know the theories, because you'll get a lot of times where it'll say, knowing this theory, how will this person do in group? Or what would this person, this is a scenario. What kind of theorist is this, whether it's individual or group, right? Okay, so if I am working from a person-centered standpoint, I am a Carl Rogerian, right? Rogerian, Carl Rogers, person-centered, right? So what that means is Carl Rogers, he didn't diagnose. The client is, they know their life, it's their choices. I'm there to support them. When I see Carl Rogers, I'm looking for congruence. Congruence means lining up. My mouth and my body should line up. Warmth, empathy, all of those things that I would look for knowing Carl Rogers. Okay, Gestalt, the here and now. Remember, the Gestalt has that empty chair. Pretend your mama's sitting in that chair over there. What do you want to say to her, right? Letting go of the past, staying in the present. Okay, TA is my parent-child adult. Remember, that's transactional analysis with Eric Berne. And Alex analysis says that we all have three ego states, right? The parent, child, and the adult. Okay. And what he talked about is how we work with each other. He said all of us should come from an adult to adult role, right? So we're adults, we're all adults. However, in a complementary stage, if we're in that stage, and for some reason I'm having a rough time, and I need someone to be my adult, whether it's my coworker or my spouse, that it's okay for someone to take care of me, right? I need someone to be my parent occasionally. It's a crossed one when that person, I'm aware of it. I think I'm in a relationship where we're adult to adult, but you're really treating me like a child. It happens in marriages, it happens in bosses, right? You think you're an adult and they're treating like a child. The worst one, of course, is the ulterior. That's when it's hidden. Eric Berne is known for that book, The Games People Play. Okay. CBT, you know that one. You're looking for their restructuring their thought processes. REBT, that's that stankin' thinking. So it's the activating event, and then the event happens, and it's how you deal with the event, right? It's the ABCD of REBT. I'm living in the South right now. That's stankin' thinking. Thank you. Okay. REBT. So what Ellis said is that it is not the incident, it is, or I'm sorry, the event, it is the belief about it. Okay, so REBT again. So the event, what I believe about it, and then the emotional consequences. So when it comes to knowing your theorist, that's why you really have to know them, because not only is it going to ask you in the individual groups, but also individual sessions, it's going to ask you in group sessions. What does it look like? Reality therapy, that's also called choice therapy. That's William Glasser. He said we all have choices in life, right? We're old enough to, and we have to make, we have to accept the consequences of our choices. Adler, when I think of Adler, I'm thinking like birth order, superior, inferior. He talked about, he's a little Freudian, so sometimes I'll see that, but most often I'm looking for birth order, inferior, and superior. Those are terms I look for. Existentialism, why am I here? What is my purpose in life, etc. Okay, so that's kind of what it looks like overall. And I mentioned before that it talks about that the Code of Ethics talks about making sure we have screening. So this one, the Association for Specialists in Government and in Group Work, they also are one of the guiding principles of how we run group. Okay, you might see this. I don't know if it's a piece of worthless material, but Adler wrote the Systematic Training for Effective program. The STEP program was really common in the 70s and 80s, and it's actually still out there. But that is based on Adler's model. So you can YouTube it and you can watch it. And it's Dinkmeyer. I used to use that one quite often back in the day. Okay, so I'm going to